Saturn is one of the most important planets to examine in your transits, for it represents the way you see and experience the universe as you have structured it. The location of transiting Saturn in your chart indicates the part of your life that is being examined and tested at this time. The house that Saturn is in represents the areas of greatest tension in your life to which you must direct your closest attention. The planets that Saturn transits in your natal chart represent energies in your life that are being challenged and behavior patterns that require examination. That was from Robert Hand's book, Planets in Transit. And I wanted to share that with you to set the tone and lay the foundation, Saturn, of this video. So I want to talk through a little bit about Saturn's transition, Saturn's transit from Aquarius into Pisces. This is a big change for Saturn and for you, for all of us, because Saturn is moving in its relationship to us via our birth chart. So Saturn moves into Pisces, from Aquarius to Pisces on March 7th of 2023. And Saturn will be in Pisces from March of 2023 until February of 2026. And so this is a big change. This is a big chunk of time. And during this whole time, we get to feel into the energy of Saturn in Pisces, Saturn in this sign, and Saturn in a whole different house for you, and different transits for you. So Pisces, well, so let's back up. So Saturn, I don't know if you picked up on that little chunk that I read in there, but it sounds kind of hard, right? It sounds kind of like we heard words like challenge, examination, testing, being tested at this time. And I appreciate that language, and I have some things to add to that. Yes, Saturn is limitation. It is a symbol of the limitations that we have in our physical existence. It is a symbol of the real world, finite boundaries that we need to deal with. And this is our limits of time, of we only have 24 hours in the day, we only have so many years on this life, we have physical limitations. The body is incredibly resilient, and there are limitations to what we can do, how long we can live. And Saturn also reminds us of the structure, the systemic limitations that we have, that a person who is experiencing a limitation, whether that is homelessness or financial insecurity, or a person is born in a marginalized group, that they are going to have a very particular experience that comes along with certain limitations, which they're going to grapple with, and that those limitations are not something that we can just hope away or wish away. Yes, there's so much that we can do, and there's so much that we can do through cultivating a spiritual practice, through taking really good care of ourselves. And at the end of the day, there is a limit. There are boundaries, and there are certain things that that we can accept or figure out how to cope with. I hope that makes sense. So I'm saying that because Saturn is also associated with sacrifice and surrender, and learning how to cope with things like death and loss. And at the same time, Saturn is also a symbol of growth and maturity. We think of like building strong muscles. This is a Saturn process, because Saturn is about showing up consistently and diligently over a long period of time. we could even say Saturn is like a form of securely attached connection, where there is that secure attachment in relationship, where there is a consistent showing up and being ready and being available to do what needs to be done. So yes, Saturn can be this challenging. Okay, so that was the part that I wanted to circle back to, is I hear Saturn used a lot in talking about, or like this idea of Saturn as testing you, or of the universe or of life providing you with obstacles to overcome, and that these are like tests, and that they make you stronger. And I think that that can be an empowering concept. At the same time, I want to sort of question that and challenge that, because I think that's a very, that's a particular way of looking at life. And if we look at life or Saturn as testing us, it's like, who says that that's the way it is? Like, sometimes we meet challenges and obstacles, not because we're being tested, but because there is injustice in life, or because there are limitations, and there's not like a moral self-growth, there's not like a spiritual reason why we experience challenges. And I realize that's not, that may or may not work for everyone. I think that looking at life as a series of tests and challenges and obstacles that we're meant to overcome, I think it can be very empowering. And I want to acknowledge that sometimes we go through hard times, and they're hard times just because life is hard sometimes. And that it can be very validating to simply accept that for what it is, and to know that that you're still going to get through the process, and that just because you're going through a hard time or there's a challenge, that it doesn't mean that there's like some test that you have to like prove yourself, because I think that adds extra layers of judgment and expectation on top of it. Like internalized self-judgment and expectation. Like, why can't I hear clients say this sometimes, like, why can't I get over this thing that I have, this pattern of behavior, this, attracting certain kind of partners, or having this constant relational dynamic, whether that's with a partner or boss, etc. And, what is the lesson that I'm not learning through this? And I would want to reframe that, in that it's not that there's a lesson that you need to learn, that there's something here that you're participating in, and it's not good or bad. There's no you should or you shouldn't. You can say, hey, I'm noticing this pattern, and I want to bring more awareness and curiosity into how this is showing up, and why, and what I can do to maybe modify it. But you don't have to prove yourself, I guess. And I hope that makes sense. I digress. So Saturn is about examining things very closely. It's about really being honest with yourself and looking at what's working, what's not working. There is a rigor that Saturn brings to things. It's not like, oh yeah, I can kind of like dip in and dip out and be, I want to use the word non-committal. That's not really exactly, it's kind of like, it's like Saturn doesn't want you to do anything half-assed. Saturn wants you to be in it, and to be committed, and to be committed to things that are growth-inducing for you, that create a strong foundation and a strong confidence in your life. And so when we experience changes with Saturn or Saturn transits, it can sometimes illuminate something that maybe wasn't or isn't or hasn't been like really secure, and it can feel scary or unstable, because we don't like to be unstable. We like things to be firm and secure. And Saturn is bringing your attention to this area so that you can examine it and so that you can understand what it is that you need to do or that you can do, or where you can ask for support to improve this area of your life. Now, what is Pisces? So we're moving from Aquarius, which is a fixed air sign, to Pisces, which is a mutable water sign. So very different energies. Pisces is ultimately about experiencing altered states of consciousness, experiencing the unseen, experiencing something that's greater than this physical, material, seen world. And so it's very interesting because Saturn is all about that which we can see, which we can touch, feel, and build upon, what we know is secure. And Pisces is about things dissolving, things that are fluid, things that are hard to describe. Pisces is highly intuitive, highly emotional. It's changeable. There's like a shape-shifting kind of quality to Pisces. And so Saturn moving into this sign feels like there could be a softening of Saturnian energy. And that we can maybe allow for our responsibilities to be more changeable, to be more curious and more open. And possibly the challenging side of Pisces is confusion. So that, you know, we have to look at all of the possibilities. Now, what I really want to share with you is that this change is less about the sign that Saturn is moving into, and it's more about Saturn's evolving relationship to you and to your chart, because that's where we're really going to get more information. So, and I want to share something with you as far as cycles, because Saturn so all of the planets have their particular cycle, their time period of moving through the whole entire zodiac. Now, the sun creates our annual year. So the sun moves through the entire zodiac in 1 year. The moon moves through the entire zodiac in 1 month-ish. And Saturn moves very slowly. So it takes Saturn about 28.5-ish years to move through the entire zodiac. And so Saturn is really about cycles, and we look at especially 7-year cycles with Saturn. This is called this is like the square, the quarter cycles of transits. That didn't make any sense. So we look at Saturn in cycles of 7 years, because this is when Saturn makes a conjunction, a square, and an opposition. And these are the what we call the hard aspects. And this is where there's a lot of Saturn energy being channeled into your life. The other piece of this too is that we look at the moment or the time period of the Saturn return, when Saturn returns to its original place where it was when you were born. And so this happens consistently. It happens when a person is about 28 to 30 years old, when a person is about 56 to about 58 years old, when a person is about 85 to 87, And then if a person is super lucky to live until they're 114, it will happen then again as well. And so these are big moments, and it's always really interesting to look at what happened or what is happening at the point of a person's Saturn return. It's very indicative of this person's Saturn story, their relationship to Saturn. What kind of Saturn? So for example, when I'm working with new clients and they're experiencing a Saturn transit, I often will wonder and ask them about if they're past, if they're past their or in their 30s at the least, I would ask them what happened around the time of their first Saturn return when they were about 28 to 30 years old, because that is always very illuminating in informing what's going on right now. Because we don't change so much that we leave behind our old patterns. I mean, sometimes we do, but there's often this symbolic theme that we carry forward with us. And so, if a person experienced during their Saturn return, their first one, they experienced a divorce or a really hard breakup or financial insecurity, or they experienced the loss of a loved one, or they had to caretake a loved one. Things like this, we look at not the literal event necessarily, but more what was your experience during that time. Were you feeling overwhelmed, overworked, or was there a lot of fear? Was there depression? What was the experiential relationship to Saturn? And how is that possibly coming up now? And what did you learn about yourself in that initial Saturn return experience that we can apply to here? Because I think that's the other big thing, is that Saturn is about initiations, and Saturn tells us when we experience a Saturn transit, we understand ourselves more, and we understand at a deep psychic level who we are and what we are here to do and what we need to be in the world. And we can forget that, and we, go along our lives and move forward, and it helps to go back to those moments in time to reflect. Now I want to share something with you. This is from Women Who Run with the Wolves by Clarissa Pinkola Estes. And she has this whole section in one of these stories called La Selva Subterránea, the initiation in the underground forest. And this is the last story in the book, and it's kind of like she talks about how this story where this woman goes into the underground forest is kind of like an overarching culmination of the wild woman's journey. Now, I also want to say, whenever I'm reading this book, I'm thinking not just of it being applied to women, but to all people. I think that there's so much in here for anyone, regardless of how they identify in their gender. So I want to be very clear about that. But she does, this book was written in the 80s, and so she does use the word woman, but I think it helps all of us. So she's talking about the 7-year cycle in a person's life. 7 is the number accorded to the moon's cycles, and it is the number of other terms of sacred time. 7 days of creation, 7 days to a week, and so forth. But beyond this, these mystical understandings is one far greater, and it is this. A woman's life is divided into phases of 7 years each. Each 7-year period stands for a certain set of experiences and learnings. These phases can be understood concretely as terms of adult development, but they may be more so understood as spiritual stages of development that do not necessarily correspond to a woman's chronological age, although sometimes that is the case. Since the beginning of time, women's lives have been divided into phases, most having to do with the changing powers of her body. And I suspect, I don't know for certain, but I really have this strong sense that when she's talking about this 7-year stages and the 7-year cycles, that Clarissa Pinkola Estes may have in mind, consciously or unconsciously, the 7-year quarter cycles of Saturn, because Saturn is associated with initiation and growth and development, maturity, and most astrologers are really looking at those quarter of Saturn cycles, the 7-year cycles. Regardless of if that's what she had in mind or not, I feel a lot of this really applies to when we're talking about Saturn. She goes on to say, as a woman transits through these cycles, her layers of defense, protection, density become more and more sheer until her very soul begins to shine through. We can sense and see the movement of the soul within the body psyche in an astonishing way as we grow older and older. So, 7 is the number of initiation. In archetypal psychology, there are literally dozens of references of the symbol of 7. Let's see. I feel like there was one other place here that I wanted to share with you. That may be it. So I really like how she talks about this, that the layers of defense and protection become more sheer until the soul begins to shine through. And I like this because I think that, oh gosh, I'm just getting the image of like a meat tenderizer. And I think that's kind of like what Saturn does to us, or that is our experience of Saturn transits, is it's like, ow, this hurts, this is so hard, but then it tenderizes us. It makes us more vulnerable and more flexible, ideally, because where we meet our limitations, where we meet our boundaries, where we are committed to showing up, and to even sacrificing so that we can show up, that this actually creates sensitivity and vulnerability. And I find that it connects a person with deeper and more tender parts of themselves, so that instead of being more rigid against something, there's an ability to flow with things. And this is very much what's happening, especially as Saturn moves into Pisces, where there's more of a flow, there's more of a relaxation into what is. Now, the last piece of this that I want to just plant the seed for you to be thinking about is, I want you to be thinking about the time when Saturn was in Sagittarius. And I'm saying this because this is when Saturn was in a square aspect from where it is now, if that makes sense. So because Saturn retrogrades, the 7-year period of when it's square, conjunct, square, opposite, and then square again, it's not always exactly 7 years. So, and if all of this is like going over your head, don't worry, just, take what you find helpful and don't worry about it if it doesn't make sense. So Saturn in Sagittarius, when it was there, it was activating a very similar part of the zodiac as it will be when it moves into Pisces. So Saturn was in Sag from December of 2014 to December of 2017. So it may be interesting to look at what was happening in your life, what themes were coming up during that time, because that's going to be, again, in a square aspect to wherever Saturn in Pisces is in your birth chart. If we're gonna look at this more fine-tunedly, Saturn was at the very beginning of Sagittarius in December 2014 to January 2015. Because of the retrograde, it also moved back into that very beginning of Sagittarius in May and June of 2015, and then again in September, October of 2015. So if I were doing a reading for you, and let's say like I didn't have your chart for some reason, I would be asking you, especially like the bulk of 2015, like what was going on for you? What were changes that were happening around your level of responsibility, your health, your commitments, work, career, committed relationships? Were there things that were changing? And maybe not, I don't know, but I just think that might be an interesting thing to look at because of the placement of Saturn. As Saturn is moving into Pisces, it's going to be connecting into a similar place for you based on the houses and based on your chart. And so I wanted to offer that to you. Now, if you are interested in getting more into this, I would love to do a personal reading with you. You can find out more on that via my website in the link below. And I just want to share with you that this is a slow and steady process of Saturn moving forward. We're going to have Saturn in Pisces for the next several years. And to be really patient with yourself and with what's happening, to give yourself loving care, and to know that you always have resources that are available to you, even when it feels like you don't. To always ask if something feels scary or challenging, to ask for support, to ask for help, to reach out to your community. That is so important whenever we're experiencing a Saturn transit or a change in Saturn from one sign to the other. So I am wishing you a wonderful week, and I'll see you soon. Bye.